You're listening to the Online Business Blueprint brought to you by PlatformLaunchers.com. I'm John Stange, and it's great to be with you this week, as always, because here we talk about building and growing and monetizing our online platforms. We talk about taking our passions, turning them into a platform so we can earn a paycheck. And this week, we're going to be talking about mistakes. Specifically, I'm about to share my 10 biggest mistakes in online business. Now, I've made more than 10 mistakes. And if I tried to list all my mistakes, I'd probably be here for a very, very long time. But I actually compiled a list of 10 of my biggest mistakes. And I'm going to actually, when I get to it here in just a moment, I'm going to list my what I think was probably my biggest mistake first. I'm not even going to make you wait for it, but I'm going to be sharing some of these things in just a moment. By the way, if you haven't yet jumped over to platformlaunchers.com, stop by our website. We got a bunch of stuff over there and some freebies as well. You can see right on our front page, we got our 21-day platform development planning guide. And you can download it for free. You could also take a free test drive of our members club, which gives you full access for 2 weeks to our live meetings, to all our online training videos, all of that. You can find it right at platformlaunchers.com. We hope you check it out. Now, as I promised, this week we're talking about my biggest mistakes in online business. And I'll say this before I give you the list. Just as a kind of like a precursor here, I have to admit that developing an online business was one of the absolute best decisions I have ever made. Those that know me well can testify that they have seen me say many, many times over and over that I thoroughly enjoy creating various forms of online content each day of the week. I literally I'm creating content every single day, and I share that content with people who live in places on this planet that I may never get to visit in person. Every week, I'm creating multiple podcasts. I host 4 podcasts, believe it or not, and I'm creating content for those podcasts. That's an everyday thing, but some of them are every week. And I'm creating videos. That's become an everyday thing. I'm creating blog posts. I'm creating newsletters. I'm hosting online training sessions. Each year, I try to release at least one new book. Sometimes I release more than one new book over the course of a year. I also get to take on new coaching clients and develop mentoring relationships. I love doing all of that. The whole online business world, it's totally my cup of tea. I love doing that. If you're listening to our podcast today, I'm sure that you love that sort of thing as well. And if I was able to go back in time about a decade, and if I was able to tell myself all about what I would be doing now, so like if I could say, all right, in 10 years in the future, this is what life is going to look like, I would have been thrilled to hear about it. And I also, knowing what life looked like for me about a decade ago, I would have been very, very pleased to know that I could earn a healthy income from doing that kind of activity, from creating that kind of content, because I'll admit to you, when I first started creating online content and developing an online business, it felt elusive. It didn't seem like I was ever going to earn a dollar here or there. And then over time, I started figuring out what works. Now, there are a variety of things. Maybe I'd even say a lot of things that are genuinely working for me at present. But as you can imagine, the road to developing a successful online business was not a smooth road. That wasn't something that was easy. That wasn't something that was simple. In fact, I have made many, many mistakes all along the way. And some of those mistakes, and you're going to see in just a second here, some of those mistakes came with a rather large price tag. But I have to tell you, I don't regret those mistakes. I don't want to repeat them, but I don't regret making them. And it doesn't really even bother me to have to admit that some of these things were financially expensive. I just think that that's just kind of par for the course. At this point, it almost just becomes, I don't know, just an interesting story to tell, right? The mistakes we make tend to become interesting stories at later seasons of life. But basically, this is how I kind of look at these things. At this point, I just consider the money that I spent making these mistakes to be my tuition in the school of online business. That's the tuition that I had to pay to learn the things that I know now. But I get to help people with these things, and I get to enjoy the benefits and the fruits of having a healthy online business. So it was worth it. And again, like I said, in just a moment, I'm going to list my top 10. But before I do, I'm going to acknowledge something even more important than these mistakes. And I'm going to say that this is something that definitely wasn't a mistake. And that's this. I definitely got things right when I made the decision to marry my wife because she has patiently supported me all throughout our marriage. And she gave me all the margin that I needed to learn and to grow all along the way without cutting me down when some of my ideas didn't work. And there were plenty of these ideas that did not work during round one. But I have to tell you, she celebrated me when I won. She stood by me when I didn't win, when I was in the process of learning and paying that expensive tuition. And I've just got to give her credit because the victories that we get to enjoy in the present would not be possible without her cooperation, without her trust, without her support along the way. So I'm just going to call her name out. Thank you, Andrea, for supporting me all along the way in the midst of these mistakes. Now, with all that being said, here's my top 10. My top 10 mistakes in online business. Here's number one. Number one is this, possibly my biggest, and I'm going to start off with it. Number one was paying $12,000 to develop a small business social network without having a business plan or a marketing plan. So at the time I did this, I really didn't know what I was doing. Social media was a new concept at the time. This was back in, I think this would be back in 2008. I did this. And social media was a brand new concept at the time. People were just getting on board with it. Even the big players like MySpace and Facebook, which were, the two big ones at the time, they couldn't even figure out how to monetize their platforms in those early days. And as I look back at that season, I should have attempted something more modest. I should have implemented better marketing when I unveiled it. It was an idea that had some reasonable opportunity to succeed. But I developed the idea and I didn't have a business plan and I didn't have a marketing plan. I just hired someone to develop it. And the social media network, it worked, but I didn't even have a plan for ongoing maintenance, really. I mean, I guess I did pay those guys that developed it to just kind of keep up with the site. But anyway, 12,000 bucks plus ongoing maintenance plus just other money that I threw at it. That was a lot of money for me at any season of life, but particularly at that season of life back in 2008. 12,000 bucks, pretty much down the drain. That was some expensive tuition to have to pay, but I learned some lessons. It was a good lesson, but I was pretty sad when it didn't work. But that was number one. All right, number two. Here we go. Number two biggest mistake that I made in online business, and this is a biggie, and I still can't believe when I look back that I did this, but it was waiting several years before starting an email list. And now I look back at this and I think, oh man, that was so ridiculous. Why did I wait to start that list? I don't know why starting an online email list intimidated me as much as it did, but I wasted years before deciding that an email list was actually important. And it's such a basic thing. And I just didn't do it. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do it. And I had thoughts in my mind, well, maybe I should. But then I kept thinking, nah, I don't really know how to do that. And I didn't understand lead magnets and I didn't understand how to collect the email addresses or how to utilize some of the services that are out there that help you bulk email without ending up in spam folders. And basically without an email list, and keep in mind this first several years that I was doing what I'm doing online, I didn't have an email list. And without an email list, I wasn't able to connect with or serve many of the people that I'm consistently serving each week. And as a result, I wondered why I wasn't earning an income. Well, a big part of earning an income online is having a very healthy email list that you can notify when you have a product or a service that you're releasing. And I didn't have that. And so I spent several years without the ability to contact the people that were actually interested in the stuff that I was doing. And I just let it intimidate me. That was a big mistake. Cost me probably, I don't even want to know how much it cost me. Very expensive mistake. All right, number three, my third biggest mistake in online business was using inferior software that I found frustrating, as did my users. So, as you can imagine, at the earlier stages of developing an online platform, I think we all tend to be very frugal. I tend to be frugal in all areas of my life. And at that time, I attempted to save a little money. When I first started, I had my very first membership community in particular. It was a membership community related to faith-based topics and online discipleship and things like that. And the software that I utilized, I had seen others using the software. but it was giving inferior results. And I remember thinking, no, I've just got to stick with it. Maybe the problem's me. And I wasted so many hours attempting to program that software and utilize that software. And sadly, my members, I started noticing over time, they barely used its features because it wasn't intuitive to learn and it wasn't intuitive to use. And so people weren't using it. And I was spending money on it, wasting money on it, and it was inferior. And I just kind of went with it because it was a bit cheaper than some of the other options, and it frustrated me. Now, the lesson that I learned from it, even though it kind of tanked certain aspects of that membership, but I remember when it was time to start platform launchers. So I started platform launchers in 2021, and I decided on day one to invest in the best software that I knew of, even though it cost me more than other options would have. Never regretted that decision, but using inferior software early on is what taught me never to make that mistake again. All right, number 4, my top 10 biggest mistakes: resisting paying for mentors, which sounds crazy because I don't resist that now, but at the time I resisted paying for mentors. So as you could imagine, I didn't have a lot of spare cash during the early days of developing my online business. I've already mentioned that I was trying to do things very frugally. But at that time, I really could have used more coaching and I really could have used more mentoring, but I resisted paying for it. But in effect, I did pay for it. And what happened was I paid for it with time. It took me a lot longer to make progress than it should have. And if I would have just paid for some mentors and some coaching and things like that several years before I did, I really think I could have saved a lot of time. But I didn't do it. I was trying to be overly frugal. I was trying to be overly cheap. And as a result, it had a negative impact on the growth of what I was trying to build because there were things I didn't know and I didn't know who to ask. And so I didn't do it. I resisted paying for mentors. And when I look back on that now, I think I should have done that way sooner. But related to that is my fifth mistake. And I want you to hear me on this one. If you ever decide to start paying for mentors and paying for coaching or anything like that, my fifth mistake, my fifth biggest mistake was this. There was a season where I aligned with mentors even after they started demonstrating selfishness and insecurity. Now, I've had multiple mentors in online business, and some of them have been fantastic. Some of them have been absolutely wonderful. But there are certain mentors I can think of that I remember I eventually chose to hire, that sadly seemed to like, and what I discovered over time was they seemed to talk a better game than they delivered. And eventually I realized that there were leaders who were operating from a state of fear, with their greatest fear really just seeming to be that your business might surpass their business in some way or surpass their level of success. And it occurred to me during that time, I thought, you know what? If a mentor won't cheer for you when you're winning, it is time to end that business relationship. But I can think of a season where I paid for mentorship in a context where the wins weren't celebrated. And when I look back at that, I think, boy, that was an expensive way to pay for guidance and direction when the success of what I was doing wasn't really being celebrated. So I would encourage you, if you do decide to hire mentors in your lane or coaches in your lane and they won't celebrate your wins, if they start acting insecure about your wins, it's definitely time to move along from that relationship and work with mentors who celebrate what you're doing, not those who get insecure or even jealous about what you're doing. All right, number 6, a sixth mistake that I made in online business, and that's this. And this one's going to sound odd because it doesn't fit with the stuff that I currently do. But number 6 is this. I actually started a dieting website, and it had helpful content. It legitimately had helpful content, but I paid more to advertise for it than I actually earned from hosting it. Now, this was in the very early days of the internet, and this is before I really, in earnest, started building online platforms like I think of now. Like for the past 10 years, I've really been focused on that. I had a few things in the online world prior to that, this being one of them. This would have been somewhere right around the year 2000, maybe 1999. It could have even been that early. But in the, I would consider that the early days still of people adopting the internet in their home. And during that era, I had actually managed to lose a lot of weight, and people started asking me for the details of what I did. And so as I was sharing those things with other people, it actually occurred to me that I might be able to sell what I did as like an online plan, especially, maybe it'd be something that would help other men. I don't know. I don't know. So I just wanted other people to know. And I thought, all right, well, let me see if I could turn this into a business. I didn't really have any experience at that point in online business. So I took the time to register a domain. I built a basic website. I developed somewhat of a marketing plan. It was a very basic marketing plan. It just basically involved advertising in, just different like print publications. And then I didn't really charge much for the plan. I thought that the marketing that I was doing through these print publications would be sufficient, and it was kind of expensive to do that marketing. But I did that, and I ended up spending way more on the marketing than I actually ever earned in selling the plan. The revenue I earned from selling the plan never matched what I spent on the marketing, and it taught me a lot about the fact that I just did not know much about marketing. And maybe I should have charged more for the plan. I don't know. But anyway, it was a mistake, but it taught me some things. All right, number 7. This is coming back to membership communities. I started a membership community at one point that didn't cover my software expenses and demanded more time that I could afford to give. Now, in the early days, part of this is going to sound ridiculous to you, but I'm just going to share it with you anyway. I'm just trying to be transparent. In the early days of online memberships, that's like online memberships are kind of a common thing now, but in the early days of online memberships, I actually built a membership community that I was actually fearful of charging what it cost me to host it. I thought, oh no, like I had that imposter syndrome that so many of us wrestle with. And I thought, oh, no one would ever pay for anything that I have to offer. And so at one point, you ready to hear what it costs to be part of this membership community? It's going to blow your mind. At one point, I charged $1 a month. $1 a month to be part of this membership community. And by the way, even at that number, I did have one member ask me for a refund. No joke. I was actually shocked. I couldn't believe that he asked me for a refund of his $1, but I refunded his $1 and thought to myself, I can't believe that I just had to refund $1. But anyway, what I discovered in doing that was that that membership was attracting people who weren't really very interested in making serious investments in themselves, and that membership community ended up being more of a time and financial drain than was healthy. I was not charging enough to actually maintain that, and it was demanding too much time. And I realized at one point I don't know what I'm doing here. And so I had to end it. And I think I was really dealing with some severe imposter syndrome at that early stage of attempting this. But again, it was, it was new. It was a new concept. I think it was on the cutting edge. I just didn't know what I was doing with it. All right. Number 8 on my list of big mistakes is this: paying thousands of dollars for training and thousands of dollars for access to a big name business celebrity, and then realizing after I paid that I would barely have any access to this person at all, and the materials that I was provided were inferior and kind of gimmicky. Now, I've decided I'm not going to elaborate on too many of the details, and I'm not even going to name names, but I will give you this caution: beware of people who use the name of celebrities or famous authors or people like that to draw you into something expensive. Most of the time, it's just a marketing trick that comes with upsell after upsell after upsell, and they will use someone's credibility and basically try and build an ecosystem around it and try and draw you in, especially if you're new and you're trying to figure things out, and they'll promise all sorts of things to you, and you'll discover that it's just upsell after upsell. And I remember at one point realizing quite a long time ago now that, you know what, I just paid thousands of dollars for training and access that really is not going to help me earn thousands of dollars from this training and from this access. Lesson learned. It was also a lesson learned in integrity. I thought, you know what, when I build things, I want to make sure people actually get value from them. All right, number 9 on my list is this, and this one's easy to do even in the present. I want you to be cautious about this because you could waste a lot of money doing this, and I'll just be brief about it. But number 9 on my list of mistakes is this: traveling to conferences that were more hype than substance. Now, every conference seems to promise the greatest education, but not every conference delivers. And I have to say, as I think back on some of these things that I've attended throughout the years, there are some conferences that I spent thousands of dollars to attend only to leave with very little to show for it. When you think about the travel and the hotel and then the tickets to the conference and all those things, and you look at that and you come back afterward and you're like, what were my biggest takeaways? And some of your biggest takeaways are very minor things. And I think, was that worth the thousands of dollars that I just spent to be part of it? Oftentimes it was not. And so over time, I've become much more selective when it comes to the conferences and things like that that I travel to attend. So traveling to conferences that were more hype than substance, definitely a mistake. But I had to make the mistake to learn the lessons, right? And here's number 10. And this is important. And it's definitely a mistake that I've made both in online business, but I've also made this mistake in certain other areas where I attempt to serve people, sometimes in ministry, sometimes in other areas of life. And that's this: not maintaining healthy boundaries when people made unreasonable demands on my time. When you serve people, which very likely you're intending to do if you're building a business, right? It's probably more than just providing products. You're looking to serve people. Well, when you serve people, you're going to experience some wonderful people who will be very respectful of your time, and they will just be lovely to work with. But you're also going to experience those whose consciences aren't really troubled by wasting your time. And if you're a people person like I am, this may be something that can be difficult to balance. Sometimes I have found this very difficult to balance because I certainly don't want to upset anybody, but I've learned that it's perfectly acceptable to set and maintain healthy professional boundaries when it comes to online business, and not maintaining healthy boundaries when people made unreasonable demands of my time. That's something I had to learn the hard way by giving up time that I really should have devoted to other things, whether it was to my own rest or to my family or to other things that are of consequence in my life. I had to learn that in time it was important for me to set up some healthy boundaries when it comes to serving people. And I hope that you understand that as well when it comes to building your online business, particularly if you're a people person who delights to serve people. You just have to figure out what's the boundary. What's the boundary when you're accessible, when you're not accessible, how people access you, things like that. All that to say, I do not regret the process that I had to go through to learn these lessons. And while I don't want to make unnecessary mistakes, I've also learned not to be fearful of making a few here and there. You just got to make mistakes, right? Making mistakes in business, making mistakes in life. This is part of what it's like to be an imperfect person trying to do the best job that you can, right? My mistakes have been great instructors. And I don't want to have to take their classes over and over again. I don't want to have to take their classes more than once, but I have to tell you, I am very grateful for the instruction that they provided, even though it may have been painful or expensive at the time. And as we wrap up this week, let me just say, as you build your online business, don't live in fear of making a few mistakes, and don't beat yourself up when you do make them, right? You're going to make some mistakes. It's not a big deal. You're going to be fine. Your business is eventually going to be growing as you keep moving forward and keep building momentum and all of that. You may even look back at some of your mistakes with some fondness. When I was putting this list together, some of these mistakes that I listed here, I look back at and I think, yeah, it was kind of painful at the time and maybe even embarrassing at the time. But now I look back at it with a certain level of fondness because I see what I learned from that. And so I'm thankful. My long-term perspective is I'm actually thankful for most of these mistakes because I've learned things and I've now watched how I've grown as an online business person and somebody who delivers content and serves people and tries to do so in an effective way and in a way with integrity and ethics and all of that and joy. I really enjoy it. And so I'm grateful for the education that I received. So if I could give you just a final word of encouragement, don't be afraid to make some mistakes. Momentum is built as you keep taking steps forward. You're going to make some mistakes along the way. Don't let that stress you out. And know this, every successful entrepreneur, every successful business person, every successful online influencer, anyone that you've seen that's ever done anything worth doing other than Jesus himself, everybody else has made mistakes. Jesus made it through mistake free. But the rest of us, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And you're going to learn from it, and you're going to grow, and it's going to make you a stronger person and a stronger success. Thank you so much for allowing me to be able to share this with us this week. I hope that something I shared here is helpful to you. As I mentioned at the start of the show, be sure to stop by platformlaunchers.com. We have a bunch of stuff over there that I hope will be helpful to you. But that is it for us this week. Thanks again for tuning in. I look forward to this time that we get to spend together each and every week. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will catch you again right here next time. Take care.